Welcome back to AV Veterans Talk. We're continuing our conversation with this week's guest, Christine Yandek. So, Christine, you shared a story with many of us here in the Antelope Valley last Veterans Day of a particular incident that happened over there that impacted your life greatly. Do you want to kind of share that story for our audience here and stuff? Was that on your first deployment, second deployment?
Oh, that was the second.
Second deployment stuff, So you want to share that and kind of tell us that story? Sure.
Sure. We were part of I was actually providing medical support to a different convoy, a resupply convoy mission.
Mm-hmm.
And we were actually in kind of a moment of downtime. We had reached our destination and delivered our supply load, and we were kind of in that moment where you breathe and you get a chance to relax before you have to load up and prepare and get ready and go back out there. And the combat outpost that we were on, we heard an explosion not far outside the gates, and there's kind of this moment where the world takes a breath because you know what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when the calls for help came over the radio, of course, it wasn't our folks. We didn't know who it was, but we were medics.
Right.
We were gonna go and help.
Good to go.
So we got in our FLAs. We had 2 field litter ambulances that were part of the convoy that we were in. The commander of the convoy gave us permission to go and help the response. So we were actually 2 of a number of ambulances that were on the outpost that we were on that went to respond. So we ended up pretty much in the back, the last 2. Unfortunately, what we didn't know at the time was that the convoy had been hit by a rather large improvised explosive device that had been planted overnight that night.
Mm-hmm.
And that there was another device that was planted, secondary IED, that was planted with hopes of targeting the medical responders, which is exactly what happened.
Right.
It ended up hitting one of the ambulances that was responding to help. And that ambulance actually had two females in it. They were both medics. One was a driver, and the other was a female sergeant that was sitting in the passenger seat. And what happened when the ambulance drove over that IED, the IED detonated basically underneath their vehicle. And the shrapnel tore through the ambulance from the floor up, and there's an oxygen canister that's strapped to the wall inside every field litter ambulance. Unfortunately, a piece of shrapnel hit that oxygen tank and caused it to explode.
Right.
And it was almost right behind the female passenger, so she was killed instantly.
Yeah.
The female driver, however, was seriously wounded, but she was not killed. So we helped in the medical response to treat the female and get her medevaced off of the scene. The rest of the trucks that were with us went on to help the Marines.
Yeah.
And I never saw the scene. It was about a mile down the road. But I do understand that there were a couple Marines who were killed that day and a couple who were wounded seriously who were saved by the medical response.
Yeah. So, once again, the stories, are traumatic. After a day like that, you go back. How do you unwind from a day like that? How do you because it's a constant. Behind your mind. But I mean, when you lose life like that, how do you?
Like I said, I had my experiences with a lot of.
So, after a day like that with that much stress and dealing with situations like that and stuff, how do you go back and unwind on a day like that? If the word is unwind is even the correct word, so how do you deal with it?
Like I said, I had my share of dealing with a lot of seriously wounded folks at Walter Reed. Some of the casualties that we would receive at Walter Reed through Andrews Air Force Base would literally be less than 72 hours status post their injuries overseas. That's how
Right.
quickly
Okay.
the system would get them back to us.
Yeah.
So we started seeing a lot of that carnage, that human cost of war before we even set foot over.
Yeah.
So you kind of take steps to prepare yourself, I guess, before you even get there.
Yeah.
If that's even possible, because I don't think anything really prepares you for war.
Yeah.
But in terms of what you asked about unwinding or dealing with, I remember days coming home from Walter Reed where I would just collapse on my living room floor in tears.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And when you're actually in the combat zone, you have to think about it in the frame of mind that you're still over there.
Yeah.
There is no going home at the end of the day and not being in a war zone anymore. And when you're there, it's about the people that you're there with.
Yeah.
And doing the best job that you can for them to keep them safe and keep them alive. And when you're in a position of leadership as a non-commissioned officer like I was, that's doubly important because they're your responsibility.
Right.
And so I suppose I just tried to do the job as best I could and be a leader for them. And then when you come home and you're not there anymore, that's when you process everything, and that's when you think about everything. And that's, I think, why this PTSD thing that's happened with this war generation is such a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And I guess in the military and stuff, once again, it's 24/7.
Right, because you're taught to live your life every day with a certain level of awareness and every time you get in a truck and go outside the safety confines of your forward operating base, anything can literally happen.
Yeah.
And so you have to be ready for anything, and you live an entire year like that, and then all of a sudden you have to adjust to being back in the civilian world when you come home.
Yeah.
And that's very hard. It's a lot harder than people realize, I think.
It is a different from all the different wars we've fought and stuff, definitely what's been going on over there. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this segment here and stuff. We'll come back and we'll talk about a little bit about coming back to the States and getting on with your life, I guess, basically after that. So we'll be right back here with Christine. I'm Bob Alvis, and thanks for joining us for this segment of AV Veterans Talk.